Have you ever felt more like yourself in a place where no one knew who you were? Where you didn't have to be anyone's friend, employee, child, just a name on a keycard. A ghost in a hotel mirror, no pressure, no expectations, just you floating. Between time zones, between lives, and somehow, for the first time in a long time, you felt free. Not lonely, not lost, just like a blank page, unwritten. What if that's not an accident? What if that feeling of being no one, nowhere, is the closest you'll ever come to meeting who you really are? This is the story of Lost in Translation, a film most people think is about loneliness, but it never was. It's a film about a very specific place that exists everywhere and nowhere, and it's a place where your identity, for once, is set free. And the mystery of it is, when you meet someone in that place, it's an encounter you never experienced before, and never will ever again. After this video, you will not look at your reflection in an empty hotel bar mirror the same way again. Lost in Translation is often remembered as a melancholy portrait of loneliness. Two strangers adrift in a foreign city, isolated by language and life's discontents. But if we look closer, we see it never was about loneliness. The true heartbeat of the film lies in the liberation that comes from being in between, and what that means for our daily lives. Sofia Coppola's Tokyo isn't just a backdrop for sad souls. It's a threshold world, a liminal space where identity becomes fluid, mutable, and free from the usual rules of social performance. In this transitional zone, Bob Harris and Charlotte shed the roles that define them back home and discover an unexpected freedom to just be. The result is a connection forged not simply in shared isolation, but in the exhilarating suspension of ordinary life. We're going to explore why this story hits so many people in a place they didn't even know existed. And we're going to do it by looking at something most people miss entirely: the film's relationship to liminal space. Those strange in-between zones where identity unravels, softens, and sometimes reforms. We'll unpack what that actually means, why it matters to us, and how Lost in Translation uses Tokyo, the hotel, the silence, and even the jet lag itself to place its characters and you in a space where transformation becomes possible. We'll bring thinkers like Victor Turner, Irving Goffman, and Marc Auger to guide us through the anthropology of thresholds, the psychology of roleplay, and the sociology of the self in suspension. And along the way, we'll challenge a core assumption about this film that most people get wrong: that it's about loneliness. It isn't. It's about what happens when loneliness becomes freedom, and what kind of truth can only be whispered in a place where no one knows your name. You could miss it if you weren't paying attention, but the Park Hyatt Tokyo isn't just the setting of Lost in Translation. It's the film's entire emotional ecosystem. A hotel is the ultimate non-place. Anthropologist Marc Auger calls spaces like these supermodernity's waiting rooms. They're clean, efficient, and designed to erase you. Everyone's passing through, no one's staying. In a hotel, you don't bring your furniture, you don't hang up your family photos, you become a guest in your own life. And that's exactly what Bob and Charlotte are. Bob is a fading movie star flown across the world to sell whiskey. He's literally there to put on a performance, but no one knows or cares who he is beyond that role. Charlotte is tagging along with a husband who's too busy to see her. She's not on vacation, she's untethered. Her life back home is on hold. Her future is a blank page. Together they exist in this high-rise terrarium, suspended above Tokyo like ghosts. It's not Japan, not America, just a world of elevators, velvet carpets, room service trays, and soft piano music echoing down the halls. And that's the genius of it. The hotel doesn't impose meaning, it removes it. But the hotel isn't the only thing that disorients them. Time itself is bending, stretching, and slipping out of sync. And in Lost in Translation, jet lag isn't just an inconvenience, it's breaking the clock to set you free. Jet lag doesn't just make you tired, it dissolves the boundary between past and present, sleep and wake, self and world. It puts you out of rhythm, not just with the city around you, but with yourself. And that's exactly what happens in Lost in Translation. Bob and Charlotte are dislocated in time as much as in space. They're not just jet-lagged, they're identity-jagged. They're awake when everyone else is asleep. eating dinner at 3 a.m., drifting through hotel corridors under fluorescent lights that never turn off. It's these suspended hours, the daily rituals that normally hold identity together, mealtimes, work hours, social obligations, evaporate. And what is left is something strange and sacred, unstructured time. Victor Turner described liminality as a time out of time. It's not just spatial dislocation, it's temporal disobedience. A refusal to move forward, a pause in the narrative, a soft rejection of the future. That's why in this film nothing ever happens on schedule. Bob oversleeps his appointments, Charlotte wanders without a plan, and both of them find themselves wide awake at hours when the world forgets to expect anything of you. That's the quiet miracle of jet lag in this movie. It makes room to question, room to notice, room to drift unattached to time, and therefore unattached to who you were supposed to be. It's not insomnia, it's temporal freedom. In the world outside, we're all performing, every day, without thinking about it. Sociologist Erving Goffman called this the presentation of self in everyday life. You act differently with your boss than with your best friend. You play roles: parent, spouse, employee, flirty. Each comes with its own costume, tone of voice, set of expectations. And for most of us, the show never stops. We don't even notice the mask anymore. But Lost in Translation takes us to a place where the performance breaks down. Bob Harris used to be a big deal. Now he's a movie star doing whiskey commercials. He plays himself, sort of, but it's hollow. The director shouts cryptic instructions in Japanese, Bob smiles, poses, nods. He doesn't know what he's doing and doesn't care. It's like watching someone cosplay their own past success. He's not exactly sad, just detached. Charlotte is in a different kind of identity crisis. She's young, married, well-educated, and completely adrift. She tries visiting a shrine, flower arranging, self-help tapes, and none of it works. In one of the most haunting lines in the film, she calls her friend back home and says quietly, "I don't know who I married. I don't know what I'm supposed to be." That's the moment it clicks. Charlotte isn't lost in Tokyo, she's lost in identity. She's exited every role that used to define her, student, partner, daughter, and hasn't found anything real to replace them. But the beauty of liminal space is that it doesn't demand answers, it just gives you room to ask the question. And that's what makes the Park Hyatt so strange and sacred. It doesn't require Charlotte or Bob to be anything. And for the first time in a long time, they aren't. There's no front stage, no one's watching. And what's left behind is something raw, a little scary, but also true. In most stories, love begins with attraction, shared interests, chemistry, a spark. But Lost in Translation does something different. It skips the spark and gives us something more intimate, more unsettling, more real. Bob and Charlotte don't fall in love. They fall into a kind of recognition. Two people in emotional free fall quietly realizing you're falling too. There's a word for that bond that forms in moments like this. Communitas. Victor Turner used it to describe what happens when people go through liminal spaces together. When all the usual structures, status, power, age, labels fall away, and you meet as equals, soul to soul. Not who you are on paper, just who you are right now in this in-between space. That's why Bob and Charlotte's connection feels so strange and sacred. It doesn't make sense outside the hotel, but inside it, it's everything. They don't really flirt, they don't plan, they don't owe each other anything. And that's exactly why they're able to be so honest. They meet at the bar, at the gym, in elevators, at 3 a.m. over a whiskey and vodka tonic. And slowly their conversations shift from awkward small talk to something softer, truer. Not what do you do, but are you okay? Not where are you from, but what are you afraid of? Bob doesn't try to impress her. Charlotte doesn't try to seduce him. They just let each other be. And in that space of mutual non-performance, something new is born. Not a romance, not a friendship, something less defined. But maybe more important, it's a moment, a shared silence in a noisy world, a kind of emotional anonymity together. And that's what makes it beautiful, because when everything you used to be falls away, sometimes the only person who can really see you is someone who doesn't know you at all. In a normal movie, this is where the romance would begin. The music would swell, the chemistry would sizzle, the narrative would tell you this is the moment that matters. But Lost in Translation doesn't give you that. It gives you something harder to hold on to. Moments that don't mean anything, and that's why they mean everything. Like the karaoke scene. A private room, neon lights, ugly furniture, Charlotte in a pink wig, Bob in a rumpled suit. It's goofy, cringeworthy. He sings Brian Ferry, she sings The Pretenders. They're bad at it, and they don't care. There's no performance here, no need to impress, just two people playing, being ridiculous, being human. This is what Victor Turner would call communitas in action. Not a grand emotional declaration, but the low-stakes absurdity of being unimportant together. And it feels more intimate than sex, because it's trust without obligation. It's the sound of your mask falling off while you're holding a karaoke mic, and someone's still looking at you like you're worth knowing. Then there's the bed scene. They lie side by side, fully clothed, barely touching, just talking. The lightning is soft, the city glows outside. They speak in whispers, like their voices might collapse the moment. This is one of the most honest scenes in the film. No agenda, no performance. Bob confesses he's miserable. Charlotte confesses she feels invisible. They don't fix each other. They just witness, and that's enough. This is what being known looks like, when there's nothing to gain. No roles, no endings, no audience. And then there's the taxi ride. No dialogue, just silence. Just neon reflections sliding across their faces. It's not flirtation, it's not seduction, it's comfort. And that, maybe, is the strangest part of all. Lost in Translation shows us connection that's more profound because it's not designed to last. It's in itself transient. It's suspended. It's liminal. The kind of closeness that only works because neither of them has to be anything in particular. And that's what's the gift of a moment like this. When the world stops asking you to perform, sometimes you find someone who doesn't need you to. There's something almost unbearable about how Lost in Translation refuses to explain itself. No confessions, no closure, no big emotional climax. Just the drifting, the whispering, the lingering sense that something happened here, even if you couldn't put it into words. And maybe that's the point. In liminal space, language breaks down. You can't explain who you are because you're still becoming. You can't say what something meant because it hasn't finished meaning it yet. That's why Sofia Coppola saturates the film in silence. Long elevator rides, midnight bars, Tokyo seen through a window, like a dream you haven't woken up from. Nothing happens, but something changes. And it's in this not happening that identity begins to shift. Charlotte doesn't become a new person, she doesn't make a big decision, she doesn't break up with her husband, but something inside of her gets named without words. And it's not lonely, it's unwritten, unstructured, free. Bob doesn't have an epiphany, but when he watches Charlotte sleep or makes her laugh, listen to her talk about feeling lost, you can see it. The relief of being seen for who he is without having to explain it. There's a kind of intimacy that only silence can hold, because words come with baggage, with definitions, with endings, but in liminal space you're not looking for endings, you're learning how to live without one. And so the silence in Lost in Translation isn't emptiness, it's protection. It protects the moment from becoming something else. It allows two people to exist in flux, untilted, and that's the most honest thing the film could do. Because not every connection has a name, not every transformation makes a sound. The whisper at the end of Lost in Translation has become legendary. People have slowed it down, enhanced the audio, speculated endlessly about what Bob says to Charlotte in that final embrace. As if decoding the words will unlock the film. As if what was said could even matter more than the fact that it was whispered. But here's the truth. We're not supposed to know. Because the whisper isn't the end of a story, it's the mark of something that can't be translated. Not into language, not into memory, not even into self. What Bob whispers is not important. What matters is that it is whispered, that it's just for her, that it vanishes the moment it's spoken. This is the final rite of liminal intimacy, a truth passed from one threshold being to another, spoken softly in the in-between with no audience, no performance, no aftermath. It's not a confession either. It's not closure. It's more like a permission slip, to remember, to let go, to carry the moment without turning it into something else. In Victor Turner's language, this is the phase of reincorporation, the return from liminality back into the world of structure and identity. Charlotte walks back to her hotel, Bob gets into a car. They're returning to their real lives, except they aren't the same people who arrived in Tokyo. Nothing dramatic has changed, but something small and therefore enormous has shifted. And they'll carry that with them, not as a romance, not as a life lesson, as a memory, as a truth that doesn't need a label. That's what makes The Whisper powerful. It refuses to turn their story into something we can consume. It protects the sacred space between them, and it lets them leave, not with answers, but with freedom. Lost in Translation was never about loneliness. It was about what happens when you step outside the story you've been telling about yourself. It's a film about not being anyone in particular, and how in that state you become more real than ever. Bob and Charlotte don't find answers. They don't find purpose. What they find is space. To exist, to drift, to whisper. And in that in-between world, the hotel that floats above the city, the elevator rides to nowhere, the nights where no one is watching, they find each other. Not in spite of being undefined, but because of it. This is the secret power of liminal space. It doesn't solve your identity crisis. It lets you put the crisis down and just be, not as a role, not as a brand, not as anyone who has to be remembered, just as a presence in a moment. And maybe that's what identity was always meant to be. Not something you hold on to, but something you let go of, just long enough to breathe. So the next time you find yourself in a place that feels like nowhere, a hotel, an airport, an empty room between two big decisions, don't rush through it. Don't try to define it. Just notice this might be the place where you finally meet yourself. And if you're lucky, someone else might be drifting there too. If this video resonated with you, if you ever felt suspended between versions of yourself, you might also enjoy my video on Euphoria and Gen Z's search for spiritual meaning. It explores how a generation that rejects traditional identities still ends up building cathedrals out of feelings, fandoms, and screen-lit rituals. You can watch it right here. Thanks for drifting with me through this one.